How are you? You've been at it.
I've been at it. Well, I just interviewed my friend Caroline about queerness and domestic
I
violence and
watched it.
death. Oh, cool. Isn't she amazing?
Amazing.
And I've been really lucky to kind of ride along with her, recent success and share my own stories, with her support, and also just really wanting to bridge more gaps, where people get lost. Like we were talking about yesterday in the queer panel, like where do our people get lost in the margins? So, it's a
Absolutely.
it's an intense conversation, but also like it really gets me like, let's go.
Well, it's exciting, and I think exciting can be a strange word when you're relating to something like so difficult. But in the death community, you have a group of people that are so ready and like stoked to start just like diving in and doing work. So it's like combining that energy with any other force, whether it's violence, sexual abuse, all of this stuff. Like there's a room for death care, and I think all of it, or the
Right.
energy that death care brings anyway. So it makes total sense in my mind that you would link the two, because it's all one and the same, right? It's how are people experiencing pain and grief, and what are they holding, and how can we support you, and how can we help you, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, all of those things. And I felt like, really inspired after the conversation yesterday with the panel, just like thinking about like more panels should happen actually, because then you learn so much from each other and your
Oh yeah.
experiences.
Well, this is the thing, and like that's a kind of exactly how I have been feeling on the off the back of this whole weekend. I was tuning into the interfaith panel earlier as well, and it's just like these conversations don't get to happen. What we have the power to make them happen, and I think that's my biggest takeaway, especially after the queer and trans panel yesterday. We're all over the world, and yet can do some significant work together. So I just find it all really exciting.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you got to be a part of that, especially after our recent conversation,
Yes.
and just feeling like, having a moderator who is also queer, it's nice. I do feel
Absolutely.
like, anybody could be a moderator, sure, but it's really nice to be like, you know, including more of our stories, more of our conversations.
I think that's what it's about. And there are so many people that have the queer experience, and it's like in that situation you don't necessarily need someone that's from that, like there are so many people that are more than capable of doing that, and so why not pull from within the community that we're directly speaking to? I think like it's so important. 'Cause
Definitely.
again, it's just amplifying those voices and making sure that they're heard. um but yeah, I feel a sense of, yeah, pride. I think that's the thing. Like after our conversation yesterday, it's just like you beam with this realization that holy shit, like we're not just like islands, like we're all kind of a front that can be utilized, and it has been utilized forever. Um,
Yeah.
so it's, yeah, really, really empowering. Um, I really recommend to anyone that's watching to go and watch. This morning, I had a conversation with Victoria Spence, from Life Rights Funeral Home in Australia, and her, oh my god, her perspective and her whole thing. Like she's a queer woman, running a funeral home in Australia, and her entire idea of horizontalizing the power, and you just go and listen to it. It's on the replay. It was such a important conversation we had this morning too. So this whole weekend's been pretty queer.
It has been, and it's kind of
It's awesome.
shocking. I don't think that
Yes.
we were anticipating that being, like, hey, this is all of our people, but I was thrilled when they invited me months ago, and I was also sort of like, what would my contribution look like? I have no idea. So it's been really funny, like, to watch the arc of like, telling them, the various things that I'm interested in, and then being like, okay, I think we can, I think we can
Yeah.
work this in, because it's like I have so many different aspects of death that I'm really excited about. But yeah,
how to bring it to life. And like, I think in this space that you've had each day here, like you've done that kind of perfectly. Like, there's no other. Yeah, I really do think so. Like, everybody's brought their own thing, and this idea of storytelling, I think we spoke about this the last time we had a conversation. People see themselves in a story, and so to host this is just awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I love telling my stories, and so it made so much sense to like, invite people. It's a very Gemini thing to do anyway, just to be like, oh, well, I'm going to tell my stories over here in this podcast, and then I'm going to invite people to come tell me theirs. And then
do it, and everything's mixed. And this and
exactly.
this and this. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. But yeah, I guess we're here to sort of chat about grief and what that looks like or doesn't look like. And
yeah, because I didn't even get to ask you since you interviewed me last time. What is your pathway? Like, what was your sort of gateway to death work?
This work, yeah. It's a really good question. It's like my favorite question to ask people because everybody comes at it from such a different sort of spot. I guess from a kid, I was always like the kid that was like creeped in some corner in the bookshop, kind of in the Wicca section, always curious. I think that's the thing, is my curiosity was always there, especially around things that are considered darker. On my like short stories, I always got back from the teachers in like elementary school being like, this is a bit troubling, but it's incredibly good. But like, note to my mom, like, what the fuck is going on here?
Right.
But yeah, I think my first sort of encounters with death personally were the biggest, most significant ones were my nonnu and nonna. And they had quite different deaths in that my nonna, I watched her die very, 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 very slowly over probably a year in hospital. It was awful to see someone go from being able-bodied, talking, walking, eating, to basically reduced to a child. Is heartbreaking. And then my grandfather, my nonnu, had a relatively quick death. And so I was always sort of moved, obviously, by that. But when I was in university, I studied criminology. I did a degree in criminology, sociology, and religion. And I started working with this woman. Her name's Dr. Sasha Reed. And she was working on this research project, and it was on missing and murdered individuals in Canada. And basically what we were doing was populating this database. So we had the names, but what we were trying to do was see if there's any sort of pattern. So by populating all this information that kind of wasn't necessarily gathered prior, so things like age, gender identity, sex, all of these things, their occupation, were they involved in sex work, were they involved with drugs, all of these sort of intersections, what was their religion. So anyway, trying to find this information, first of all, was like, depending on the person, could have been the easiest thing or impossible. And that really struck me. So basically, if a woman looked like me, was white, cisgendered, and middle class, you could find everything. You could know where she went to school. You could find every bit of information. But then for a non-binary Indigenous person, there's nothing. And over and over and over and over again, Canada, and I'm sure the US is the same, my experience is from a Canadian perspective, the issue with the entire Indigenous tragedy that this country was built on, when you see the sheer numbers, I think it just sort of, I felt sick. I didn't know what to do. And it made me just like really start thinking, like, everybody deserves a dignified death. Everybody deserves to be honored. Everybody deserves, for an article to be like something so benign, but like, if someone wants to access information about whoever, they should be able to type it in, find it, just like they would for John Benet Ramsey. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
we know her name. We will know
right?
it till, like, forever. Right.
Exactly. Missing white woman syndrome, right? It's a
Right.
thing. And so that was kind of like the seed that got planted, and I was like, okay, what can I do? So I did research in serial homicide. So that's what I did my master's in when I moved to England. So I did research on representation based on things like gender and stuff in terms of serial killers. And again, these are really extreme forms of violence. But in those extremes, you kind of see the patterns of day to day. Like they're on the very extreme end, but you do see kind of the core societal values and what people respond to in learning about this. And so I finished that degree, and I was like, oh God, what the fuck do I do next? You know, I don't resonate with the criminal justice system. It's a mess, right? And at one point I was really sort of like, okay, change has to come from within. You know, I can maybe be that person. I'll go into it and really try to like do something positive. But the more and more I interacted with that system, the binaries and how black and white things were, I cannot be that person to tell you, no, actually, you didn't fill out one slip of paper, therefore you can't get your criminal record expunged, therefore XYZ, the rest of your life is screwed. You know, like that to me was tragic. To see people who have, you know, trauma and addiction issues and, you know, so this is the thing, right? Crime is so nuanced. Like nobody just decides to go out one day and do whatever. So I was just trying to sort my life out really. And I came across a magazine that had this funeral home in it. And I was like, what is this? You know, I was like, ooh, what? And so at this point I was toying with doing a PhD at Bath, or in death studies and basically looking at memorialization. And then this kind of came across my path and I just was like, fuck it. I'm going to just send them an email. I have no prior experience in this work, but I feel incredibly called to. And so I said, hey, look, if you ever need someone to help in any capacity, just let me know. And then I hadn't heard anything for a while. So I just figured, okay, fair enough. It was a pretty random email where I was gushing, being like, oh, like everything you're doing is amazing. I think this is so revolutionary, you know, like really poured my heart out in this email. Probably looked like kind of a twat, but, you know, about 6 months later, I got a response and they were like, oh, do you want to come in? And we spoke and we immediately sort of clicked. And that kind of started everything. Is very new funeral home. And so it's just me. It was just me. So it was quite intense being the only employee because, you know, I sort of stepped up to a role that I didn't really fully understand.
Right.
Really. I had no understanding, right?
Right.
I had obviously been to funerals and all of that. And I'd seen, you know, what had happened with my nonnu and nonna and other people's funerals that I'd gone to, but didn't know exactly what went on. And so, you know, after a bit of training and whatever, I kind of just got chucked into the deep end, which was the best way to learn. Even though at times I really resented it. And I was kind of like, why isn't somebody sitting and holding my hand and like, telling me, you know, but so much of the work is intuitive in terms of, you know, you sit and you talk to a family that comes in and it just, I guess, I'm just trying to think of how to word this, holding the space for somebody that's going through the worst time in their life, because that's exactly what it is, right? Like funerals and endings are really hard.
Right.
And so to bear witness, I guess, was almost an intuitive thing. I didn't really have a clue, but it just made sense to me that these people needed support and they needed it in every way possible. And so, yeah, I loved doing that work. So it opened my eyes, you know, like I had no idea. I was talking the other night on A Mortician's Tale. There's like this video game that was made. It's like a click through and you're a mortician and it's awesome and it's actually really, really well done. But for example, things like an eye cap or the fact that people's mouths get sewn shut, X, Y, and Z. When the first time, like, my colleague went to go and do that, I was like, what are you doing? Like, it's quite intense,
Yeah.
and visceral and like really sort of shocking. But then you see how, amazing they look afterwards and how it just is what it is. And like these like weird tricks of the trade and all of that. But it wasn't even so much that. It was like being trusted to take care of people's person. Like I think the first time I dressed someone, I was like, oh, what have I gotten myself into? It's Tuesday, it's 3 p.m. How am I, like,
right.
how did this and this? But very, very, very quickly, I was just like, this just makes sense to me to be doing. Like, of course I'd be doing this on a Tuesday at 3 p.m. That's exactly what I should be doing. And so we started running like peer-to-peer groups, and that's kind of where I realized where my heart, I guess, lies. And that's in connecting with people in grief and just giving them breathing room, I guess, whatever that looks like. And so, yeah, that's the journey. And then I've worked in a crematorium, which was fine. Interesting to see it from that perspective. Cremation is not something I entirely morally align with, but it was interesting to see the process because it's a significant option here, especially in the UK. Like majority of people do get cremated.
I was going to say, I learned that the other day from my conversation with Ollie Spleen. He was saying that most people get cremated. That's kind of like, yeah. So I was going to ask you that, is that like a land scarcity?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. I think it does come down to space. A plot is expensive. A burial plot is expensive. Eco burial, not so much,
Right.
But again, it's armoring people with the knowledge that that's an option is like half the battle, right? Because people in their minds are like, okay, traditional burial of cremation, like right. That's it. Right. You don't know that these other things are available. But here, like, yeah, in the UK specifically, that's kind of where my experience lies. There's so much kind of BS around, like, were you a resident of the borough? Were you not? Like, and if you weren't, the price is like triple. It's like in terms of burial. So people are like, F this, I'm just getting cremated. It's easier. A lot of people, I don't know. It's really interesting, because to me, it's like my biggest fear. I do not want to be cremated.
So what is your desire? Like, what would be your ideal disposition?
Yeah. I think it would be an eco burial.
Okay.
I love the idea of being, just chilling in a shroud and, right. Getting munched up. But then there is this very cheeky part of me that's like, I need a plot at Brompton Cemetery and it needs to be Victorian and massive. Like, so I really struggle with, I guess my morals and then also my need to be dramatic. But yeah, so either of those, I'm happy with either. But again, then if options come to where I am at the time that are things like, recompose, water cremation, all of these things are happening.
Right.
God knows what'll happen or what'll be there at that time. But it's so important to have this conversation. But what do you want? What do you want, Moon?
Well, I'm like you. I would like to have the green burial if possible. Here in California, it's extremely expensive even though we have lots of land, it's still like, real estate prices of having someone buried in a cemetery. And the cemeteries here, from what I've seen, I could be wrong and someone could, correct me. Generally speaking, are not as thrilling as like, an English cemetery or New Orleans cemetery. There is the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, which is fabulous. But yeah, something really simple. I just recently was reconnecting with my mentor at Sacred Crossings, and who's also English, Olivia.
Yeah.
And she was telling me that funerals at sea are really popular right now. She was like, trending, like we kind of laughed because it's like, it's always a little bit morbid. And the reasons I was talking to her was like, personal. So, but she was like, it's really become very popular here to bury loved ones at sea, which is kind of a like the equivalent of your Broughton Cemetery.
Yeah.
Mine would be like, ocean, but I just don't know if that's sustainable, like for, financial situation, or just like, is it really complicated? I wouldn't want to complicate that for, my family.
Whoever's.
But that is kind of like, to me, in a way, instead of going into the earth and, decomposing that way, like the ocean is, is kind of like my, my place.
Yeah.
So
the last time we were talking, you were saying, like what a treat it is to live so close.
Yeah.
And
it's
I
amazing.
think like it's amazing, right? Like it's so healing. But it's also like just for each of us to find like those places, whatever it is. Like for me, it does happen to be these like very beautiful cemeteries.
Right.
Where I go and I am just able to be like, okay, breath, like I can chill out now. And I think everybody should kind of seek out theirs. And you'll know what it is, once you're there. But again, it's like the active sort of like, I need to sort myself out a bit here. Let me go to my spot. And that's something I try to do as much as humanly possible. But also like, it's a bit of a death meditation in its own right. And same with something like the ocean. It's so vast and so massive and so cyclical. And so like, you can connect anything you want to dying.
Definitely.
Which is the beauty of it, the scariness of it, I guess.
I think that gets really removed because people think that they should do something, that's more, traditional, or I don't know, like there's a lot of pressure on doing things, really as a almost performative.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about? Like
Yes.
having the whole, like, big steel coffin, with satin lining and things.
Yeah.
That's always an interesting conversation with people who don't talk about this all the time, because it's like, actually, there are so many different options, and
Exactly.
maybe you just don't know about them, or think that that's out of reach. And so like you, like I love talking about it with a lot of intention to like, hopefully people are listening and they're talking like within their families about possibilities.
Yeah, I think it's exactly. I think for me, like the whole kind of driving force behind starting Light and Death and just talking and sharing is just about planting those seeds. Because for example, just tying it back for me, personally, I've seen it and how disconnected it feels going to a funeral that's meant to be like a rite of passage, something quite healing. And when it's not that, you can feel it immediately when it's
Right.
not reflective of the person that was. It's heartbreaking. You leave feeling like, what the fuck just happened, rather than wow. And a funeral is an opportunity for that, again, that breath, that healing to take place. Like that's such a fundamental part. It's a ritual. It's a space in order to mourn, which is sharing your grief. I think to my dear friend Jason that died last year, and because of COVID and stuff, it ended up in this, and this was in Canada and I was in the UK, so unfortunately I couldn't like help with the planning. But it ended up being at this random church because it was the only place that had space, and because of COVID, like it was all such a nightmare. And I remember all of us sitting there and to the point where like we were almost laughing because it was so like, what is happening right now? Like, what,
Right.
this priest is on a mad one, and we're all just like, what? Like Jason literally was like, he's a magician. Like, what are we doing here? You know, like, you know. So yeah, I think it's just planting those seeds of curiosity, if anything, in order to encourage people to talk, because when you do have that healing experience, and I've seen it, you know, with clients, and being like, you know, you can do this, right? And being like, no way, no way, no way. And you're like, yeah, you can literally basically do whatever you want. Obviously follow like whatever legislation's around you, but like you can do a lot more than you think. And they always end up being so beautiful. And it was just so exciting to be a part of that, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely more
facilitation.
meaningful. Right.
Yeah. And I think that's what it's all about, right? Like talking about like grief and like for me, existential dread, like go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've, you know, my mental health has not always been amazing. It's still something I struggle with. Same with alcoholism. Like I'm an alcoholic. I haven't drank for, you know, I think it'll be 3 years in March. And like, that was a grief.
Right.
And it's realizing that grief shows up in so many places in your life, and it's all baby deaths, right? It's
Right.
all practice for like the big shebang at the end. And it's important to me. And I don't know if I fully like grasp why, but I think it's because really, we're like specks in like this the grand, like this, as it matters as much as it doesn't matter. And like I can really struggle with that. I can really dig myself into a hole when my mental health isn't great, being like, there's no point of anything, this is all meaningless. I can really get stuck there. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, like this space was a way to explore that fear, to talk about it firstly, and realize, holy shit, actually we all feel the same.
Mm-hmm.
And to really just like be like, I'm going to do XYZ despite that, almost in spite of, because, you know, existential fear is huge, and we
It
all have it.
is.
It's like the massive unifier. No one knows what's going on, you know.
No.
And also it's given me like a deep, profound appreciation for life that I just didn't have before.
Isn't that interesting? Like once you lean into death, then you really start recognizing like, oh, you know, how precious this experience we call life is.
100%.
Especially in light of like losing people, you know, and you're like, you know, that really brings it around. So like, wow, you know, they didn't get this opportunity, or, you know, it's just, or, and especially with, I guess, with younger people, particularly.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And you know, I'm someone that spent a lot of time in my life suicidal, like a lot of time. And this space has allowed me to acknowledge that and really just learn how to say that. But
Same.
also to, yeah, and like what a gift, right? Like, because being in that space sucks. There's no like way to like, it's not great.
Right.
And it can be exhausting, but to find like an arena, I guess, to channel that kind of energy, but also to realize like, actually this, even though this sucks right now, it's still a massive gift. And that has been like revolutionary for me.
It's a real
Huge.
duality.
Yeah.
Right.
And the more you like start to like dig in, you realize everything is like that.
Right.
You know, and that's like the amazing and frustrating thing. Is you're like, oh my god, there's two sides to every coin. Well, actually there's 100 sides to every coin. Like, you know, and I find that like utterly exciting. Whereas before I probably would have been like overwhelmed and terrified. And also, you know, seeing a 25-year-old in a coffin in front of me, that's shocking.
Right.
It's shocking to see anyone dead. It is. Even though it's the most natural thing in the world, or like, you know, drive to exist, our drive to like survive is like, oh God, that's not ever going to happen to me. It's like the quickest way to put something in perspective is to interact with death.
Right.
And I know, yeah, you've shared your experience with me around suicide and how that's impacted you. And yeah, you just said like, same, like you've had experiences around suicidal thoughts as well. And like, it's hard.
It's extremely isolating. And I think stigma is one of the things that, you know, prevents us from sharing our stories and, you know, recognizing that it's not uncommon because of existential dread, because of like living in this reality. And then, you know, people tending to like go either in the direction of like shaming someone for thinking that, or like overly worrying and kind of preventing them from just sharing their story. And, you know, one of the things I recognized about myself with my partner who took her own life was that I didn't really judge that she wanted to die, which I feel like is pretty hard for most people because, you know, that's actually been a theme throughout my life because I've met people that have shared with me that they wanted to die in different situations.
Yep.
And sometimes it's just that they needed someone to, you know, confide in. And then sometimes it was actually like very real, like my friend who was in her 80s who did actually take her own life, you know, without the protocol behind her, but she was determined. And I was like, you know, you're like 83 years old, if that makes sense for you. And even with my ex-wife, you know, she was only like 44, I think, but a very serious addict. It's just, you know, I think, you know, in the next conversation I'm actually having is a lot about suicidal awareness. It's like, I'm glad people share that with me, and I'm glad you share that with me because it just helps like make our connection stronger, you know.
I agree. I completely agree. And I think the more that we just kind of say it, and it's the same with, you know, talking about anything along the sort of shame spectrum. That's kind of how I think of it. I'm like, whatever causes you shame, like just get it out.
Right.
Because it doesn't exist as intensely when you do. It's when it's just chilling within you. And there's so many things that cause it, right? There's, oh my God, do I like women? Do I like men? I have a drinking problem. All of, you know, trauma, all of this stuff, right? Like can fuck up your judgment and your, I guess, not judgment, but trust to want to share it. But when you do, like, give that shame a space to breathe, it doesn't feel as crazy. It doesn't feel as isolating. It doesn't feel as scary.
Right.
And I guess that's kind of what it's about for me, really. And yeah, I really feel you when you say like you've seen it and you get it. And I think what a way, I guess, to respect someone in respecting their wishes and what they, you know, have struggled with and are dealing with and are facing on a day-to-day basis. All we can do is try to understand each other.
Right. That's so true.
Yeah, it's an attempt.
Perspective is everything.
Yeah, it's an attempt. And it's like, you know, it's Irvin Yalom talks about this. Dr. Irvin Yalom, I recommend if anyone wants to like read about like any sort of existential stuff. He has this massive textbook and it's called Existential Psychotherapy. And he talks about these givens of existence, death being the first, like we are all going to die. But then he also touches on this point of like loneliness, and not in the loneliness of like, oh yeah, I'm gonna, you know, miss so and so when they are gone and I'm by myself for a bit. But it's the fact that like we are actually alone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nobody will be you. No one will experience the world as you do. No one sees the world as you do. We can come together and it's amazing. But at the end of the day, like you're experiencing your reality on your own. And that is gnarly. That is fucking crazy, right? Like, and so it's all we can do is just try to understand. And I think it's just like having that willingness and that open-mindedness. And I'm sure you've experienced this in your doula work. You know, people just want to be heard.
Right. They want to be validated.
Yeah. It's fundamental, I think. And so yeah, I guess that's kind of my goal, if any, is to just create space for other people to do that. Because people have been there when I've needed it. And people have, and they haven't, and they have, and they haven't. And it's always better when they are.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yes.
Like, duh. Right? Like, we crave connection. We crave, you know, each other, community. You know, death, for example, used to be a community event. Now it happens alone a lot of the time. And that's why, like, seeing things like Lifting the Lid happen and talking about it, and doulas and all of these people that are actors in this system coming together is so awesome. Because death is like it's just a picture of how we're living as a society now anyway. Very
right.
isolated. When really we used to just be chilling together. You know? Like, why can't, like, let's just do that some more. I'm down to chill. So yeah. It's good stuff, but it's not always easy.
No, it's not. I mean, I think, you know, what prevents us is trying to understand the commonalities that we all share. And like you're saying, with connection, one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking was like, I'm really grateful that I took the courses that I did, because some of the objectives through Sacred Crossing were just to like be really creative and expansive in your thinking about death, your own mortality, versus like, this is how you know, pragmatically act as a death doula, which was there. It was there too, but also some of it was just like going, literally the first course she offers is called Going into the Grave, where she walks you through the process of dying and confronting your fears and existential dread. And I was really interested in this one speaker she had who gave a talk on, which is very LA, by the way, on fractals and death.
Yeah.
And it's this interesting Japanese, I think she's a psychiatrist who has this whole like aspect of fractal thinking and dying. And one of the things that she was really talking about was like, you know, there's not just two sides to the coin. It's the expansiveness of like whatever you can imagine, you know, for your life or in your death is possible. And so for someone who also has spent a lot of time like in existential dread mode, I was like, this is so refreshing, because it's the opposite of like, well, you just have to keep shifting your perspective. You can have an international virtual death festival. Sure, you can. Up to 30,000 people, free, you know, like talk about whatever you want, because it's possible.
Yeah.
You know? And I think sometimes people get really weighed down and like, well, I have to do this, or, you know, my family's expecting this, or this isn't, you know, I can't live my truth because it's, you know, not allowed. Or it's like, you just have to give yourself compassion and permission, especially in grief.
Yes, absolutely. Like, I'm so happy you just touched on that, this idea of self-compassion. I just got off the phone with a friend of mine that's in rehab. And I hadn't heard from him in a bit of time, because obviously, you know, they don't have your phone and whatever. And I get this call from Huntsville, Ontario. You know, I'm in London, and I was like, holy shit, it's Jared, like fucking stop everything. But anyway, him and I were just talking, and you know, that's exactly what I said to him. I was like, when was the last time you showed yourself some love and some compassion? You know, this is a person that's gone through so much grief, you know, homeless for the past 8 years, extensive trauma, you know, serious addiction issues. And to hear him, you know, even just after a couple of weeks, like gain like that tiny, and that's what it's about, right? It's empowering each other to not only big each other up, but it's giving each other the tools to learn how to big yourself up. Because that is hard. And especially when we're confronting these huge things like loss in all forms. You know, losing a job can put you through a cycle of grief. You know, losing a friend, not through death. You know, there's all this disenfranchised grief that, you know, we just don't talk. Pet loss. You know, we've had some awesome people talking about losing a pet. And for me, it's wherever there's an attachment, there will be grief.
Absolutely.
No matter what flavor of attachment or intensity of attachment, you know, we're experiencing grief at all times. And to be honest, it's probably one of the first experiences we have. You know, think of like when you're a little Bubba that just got like pushed into the world. You know, you were chilling somewhere warm and safe, and then you just got chucked into this like pretty scary, terrifying. You know, you're grieving for that space again. You're like, shove me back in there. I don't want to be here. And then it happens again when you realize, you know, oh my God, my caregiver isn't, you know, the whole world. They're just a part of the world. There's a grief there when you're a young kid and you realize, oh my gosh, my parents are people and not just these objects that feed me and bathe me. And you know, it happens so much. It's growing out of childhood. It's puberty. It's grief is entwined in all of these things. And so it's always a shock, no matter what, when we lose a person. But when you acknowledge all the grief that you've experienced before, you realize, actually, on some level, I've experienced this. And I kind of, no matter what, know that I will be able to get through it, even though in those moments it feels, how will I ever? Right?
Right. It's
but you don't. It is. It shatters your world, you know, everything stops. But it also doesn't stop, right? And I think that's the biggest problem is your world stopped, but everything else is going on around you. And that's so hard to contend with. And we live in a world that's not very literate around grief. And that's also a massive thing that I try to, I guess, advocate for is we need to just as the same as you know, we're learning and we're evolving and you know, we're gaining, I guess, all of this vocabulary or understanding. These are things that need to be at the forefront of this conversation. Like workplaces need to have this incorporated. Schools need to have this incorporated because it's inevitable.
Right.
I don't know, but yeah, grief is huge. And also you never get over it. You grow around it. I think that's the model. If I had to pick one that resonates with me, is that your grief stays and it ebbs and it flows, but you have to grow around it and it will always be there. And that's both comforting and also scary, I think.
Yeah, I think like that idea of like, you know, like picturing, well, I just read this quote by the author Selena Godin this morning. And I think she was saying about, you know, having a stone kind of like inside of you. So I was just picturing that like little stone in your center and then like moss growing around it, you know, or something, very organic. Like you're going to carry that with you, that little stone baby in your chest or your stomach or wherever, you know, in your heart. And growing around it, like with it. That's very true.
And I love, like, whenever someone links it to nature, right? Like, bless her, because yeah, exactly that. It's the most natural thing in the world that we lose each other, that we experience loss. It's part of it. It's like, unfortunately, part of the contract, that we never probably signed up to be a part of this contract, but we're a part of it.
Damn
and I
it.
think that, yeah. Like, that's something to contend with too. You often hear people being like, I didn't fucking ask for this. And it's like, yeah, who would? If you realize that was, like, I guess, the price that you had to pay for loving someone, or having them in your life in any way, that doesn't have to be positive. It can also be negative. You can experience grief when the relationship hasn't been amazing. That's also something really important to talk about. It's whenever there's been some form of attachment, positive, negative, you can have a reaction, and it's so normal. But we don't see it that way often.
I know. I'm hoping that, post world pandemic, or wherever we are, because I don't like to say post necessarily, but wherever we are in that, story, that we're giving more space and more consideration, because I think that one of the things that was really kind of revealed to us was like, oh shit, we're really bad at this.
Yeah.
I mean, I was already pretty good at it, I have to say. Like, I was already like, yeah, I really just experienced some serious fucking loss lately. So powerful. But I was not prepared for, like, the reverberations of, like, vicarious grief to just, like, echo throughout every aspect of humanity. Like, it's really funny because it's like, here I am getting my certificate, and I'm like, cool, next, ready to do this. And then it's
ready.
Like, this.
Just kidding.
And we had these little conversations with Olivia, my mentor, like on Zoom, kind of like, now we're all like sitting with, like, what do we do now? We're all looking to her because, she's older, she's wiser, she's a grandmother, she's a pioneer. And she's like, I really don't know. I have nothing, like, we just have to sit with this, and, we'll figure our paths, and we'll be here for each other, and, we'll figure out, like, what is available next. And it was like, okay, so now collectively we will all have to lean into this uncertainty that we've all been sort of like humorously just like talking about, reading about, here it is, here's your, it's the big one, the big show. I don't know if you listen to or like Stephen Jenkinson, the author of Die Wise.
Yes.
I have some interest in Stephen Jenkinson. I'm not like a groupie, which a lot of people are, like, hardcore. But one of the things I really liked recently was his interview about the pandemic as a prism, and like a moment of like looking at grief through this, like, crystallized lens. And he used Beowulf as an example of, which I loved.
I love that as well.
I thought you would. That's why I mentioned it, because some people are like, I don't think I read that one, And I'm like, oh, really? I think I had to read it a few times. I think we actually acted it out, like theater nerds. Like, I think I was Grendel. I'm just gonna say. I know that I was. But I was like, what a cool way of looking at it. Like, oh, we don't want to look at this scary thing. We're gonna put it in a room and shut the door. And then, the pandemic, Grendel, is like, no, you're not. I'm gonna bust through that shit, and you humans are gonna deal with me, and also like experience this wondrous, monstrous
thing.
Change.
Beast. Exactly. Yeah, I think it catapulted grief and death and dying to the forefront of minds that had not ever considered it. you know, and that's both a blessing and a curse. Like, this time has been really like hard. It's hard, you know.
It's a mellow harsher.
Yeah. It's a lot. On so many levels, right? And like, I think to have lived right now, sometimes I'm like, this is a cosmic joke, right? Like of all, but then you think of it and you're like, actually, was there ever a time that was just great? Probably not really. You know, like at some level, there's always been something that humans have had to contend with. And so I just try to look at all the amazing things that have come out of this pandemic, while still acknowledging and really deeply respecting all the suffering and pain that has come with it.
Right.
But, you know, for example, what's happening right now? Us being able to have this conversation across like a massive span, and like people are connecting in ways that I don't really think was particularly happening before, out of sheer necessity. And there's something really beautiful in that. You know, utilizing the internet, even though it's like, again, blessing and a curse, like all of these things, right? There's the good, the bad, the ugly, I love the idea of the prison because it's reflecting of all of it.
Right. Like the labyrinth, like the goblin.
Yes. Yeah. Like, you know, the snake eating itself. Like that's what we're up against here with literally everything. Like everything is eating itself and being born, and like that might sound like a bit of a mind fuck because it does to me. But it's true. And also, what a strange, weird lesson to have just finished death doula training and then to have this just, you know, happen. What a weird, strange, beautiful lesson that has probably.
It's been so weird because I was really mentally preparing. You know, like she was like, make business cards. So I made business cards. I was trying to do all the things that I would ordinarily feel like, I really hate that. But she's like, make business cards, consider, you know, like maybe I was even considering like helping her, work for her, commuting, whatever.
Yes.
And then it was like, oh, well, that's completely gone because this is what we're doing now. And, you know, honestly, like at the beginning of the, you know, the original shutdown here, I was like, well, I live in a state where it's illegal to get high. So I would just like smoke a ton of pot and do yoga and meditate on like, what's next?
Yeah.
And then I had to get out of this fog because it was not really helping me be present to the fact that like, okay, so you can't go do the thing that you thought you were going to go do. What can you do? And that's like where these like little things started popping up, you know, and recognizing that like, you know, I could strip away these crutches, these vices, and I started like leaning into grief and then conversation with people like Susan, who says hi. You know,
hello, Susan.
Death ambassadors. You know, amazing people like yourself, and just, you know, have these conversations and, you know, put these questions out there and intentions. I completely agree with you. I think it's like, it's both. It's like, it's devastating and it's also like fascinating.
Yeah. And that's the human experience sort of summed up, right?
Definitely.
Right? You know, and that's also like, that's also death. Like it throws wrenches into the plans, you know, just when you think you have a plan and that's going to happen. That's the thing, I guess, one of my love-hate things with death is it's on its own terms. It's not on yours. And I think like there's
not on a schedule.
No, it's a huge practice in surrender. And that can be applied to every aspect of life.
I love that word. I'm going to put it in the chat.
Yeah, surrender. Like that's kind of what this time period has taught me is just like, you know, I'm putting my hands up. It's okay. It's not, but it is. And it will be. But yeah, it's been so good talking to you. I know that you have, who's up next?
My friend Nadja in Mexico City, also known as Madame Blue. Yeah, we'll be talking more about suicide and awareness and stigma. Actually, it's like just a really great day because it's been this continuation on the theme, like talking to Caroline about domestic violence, talking to you about grief and bereavement. Like it's actually all of you, you know, and your actual your studies with like homicide and, you know, Nadja and I were just talking about what her experience has been living in Mexico City and like femicide.
Yes.
So I was really excited to like, yeah, it's just kind of like this great day of like continuation on a theme. I wanted to ask you if you could have tea with anyone dead, who would it be and where?
Oh my God, it's such a good question. And where? Tea.
My cat is snoring so loudly right now. It's hilarious.
Bless.
She's so ridiculous.
I love it. Mine is like it's dinner time.
I heard her.
She's letting herself be known. Tea. I think an anonymous woman who died during the witch trials. Anyone that had to experience that. And where? Like some like cute little hobbit house. Like I'd like that. But yeah, I think
in the States, like in the like place like Salem, like where it took place, or you would just time warp all the way through?
Yeah, I think I would go everywhere and nowhere at once. But no, actually, I think I would stay in England. I think I would stay because there's so many spots here. Before it sort of moved over to the States, you know, the European witch hunt was like, yeah, absolutely crazy. But I just think, isn't that just what that time must have been like for people like me, you know, mentally ill, confused, a bit gay, you know, like all of these things, like a woman doing anything was penalized and put to death for. So yeah, I don't know why I'm feeling into that energy.
I really like it. I mean, well, you know, you're a witchy person, witchy queer you, so I feel like that resonates perfectly. And of course, yeah, there's like our whole deep history of witch trials. I guess what I was like, you know, always think of the ones here because they're so impressed upon us living in the United States. Like they killed witches here, but of course they killed witches historically throughout. Yeah, that's a really interesting choice, and I really like it.
Who's yours, Moon? Before I know you need a break, but who's yours?
Oh, it always changes.
I know.
Probably for me, I would bring back somebody, you know, I would like to bring back my therapist. I just miss her so much and I love her so much. I know she's here and I know she would love these conversations. She's on my altar. But it would just be fascinating because, you know, she was always like, when she was dying, she was like, death is your gift, which is a very Buffy like reference for me anyway. I love Buffy. And I was like, weird, I don't know what that means. And so now like that this is happening, it would just be really cool to like talk to her. And I would just bring her right here to California because I would love to show her like where I'm living and
what's going on.
Well, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
Like being one of our, you know, charming, lovely hostesses and for moderating with us yesterday and, you know, only more, you know, I'd love to talk to you again. For Queer Does Story Season 2.
Absolutely. I cannot wait. But yeah, this is a conversation that will be ongoing for the rest of forever. And I'm excited. Thank you so much for asking me to be a part of this. It's so nice. It's so nice speaking with you. And I'm just so grateful that we've connected.
Me too, my friend. I love you.
I love you too.
Be well, and I'll see you in the inner space. Maybe I'll see you later at the little gathering we're supposed to
the
have.
send off. Absolutely, you'll see me.
Okay. Awesome.
Lots of love.
Lots
Bye,
of love
peeps.
to you.
I'll be
Thank
be
you.
watching from the sidelines.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Bye.